Letter 23. My dear Wormwood, through this girl and her disgusting family, the patient is now getting to know more Christians every day, and very intelligent Christians too. This is referring to Wormwood's patient's girlfriend. So apparently she comes from a Christian home, and that is disgusting to Screwtape. For a long time, it will be quite impossible to remove spirituality from his life. Very well then, we must corrupt it. No doubt you have often practiced transforming yourself into an angel of light as a parade ground exercise. Now is the time to do it in the face of the enemy. The world and the flesh have failed us. A third power remains. And by third power, he means the idea of religion. And success of this third kind is the most glorious of all. A spoiled saint, a Pharisee, an inquisitor, or a magician makes better sport in hell than a mere common tyrant or debauchee. Look round your patient's new friends. I find that the best point of attack would be the borderline between theology and politics. Several of his new friends are very much alive to the social implications of their religion. That in itself is a bad thing, but good can be made out of it. So this third strategy that he is going to go into in this next paragraph is the argument about the history of Christianity. You will find that a good many Christian political writers think that Christianity began going wrong and departing from the doctrine of its founder at a very early stage. Now, this idea must be used by us to encourage once again the conception of a historical Jesus, to be found by clearing away later additions and perversions, and then to be contrasted with the whole Christian tradition. In the last generation, we promoted the construction of such a historical Jesus on liberal and humanitarian lines. We are now putting forward a new historical Jesus on Marxian catastrophic and revolutionary lines. The advantages of these constructions, which we intend to change every 30 years or so, are manifold. In the first place, they all tend to direct men's devotion to something which does not exist, for each historical Jesus is unhistorical. The documents say what they say and cannot be added to. Each new historical Jesus, therefore, has to be got out of them by suppression at one point and exaggeration at another, and by that sort of guessing, brilliant is the adjective we teach humans to apply to it, on which no one would risk 10 shillings in ordinary life, but which is enough to produce a crop of new Napoleons, new Shakespeares, and new Swifts, not Taylor Swift, but rather Jonathan Swift, in every publisher's autumn list. In the second place, all such constructions place the importance of their historical Jesus in some peculiar theory he is supposed to have promoted. He is to have been a great man in the modern sense of the word, one standing at the terminus of some centrifugal and unbalanced line of thought, a crack vending a remedy. We thus distract men's minds from who he is and what he did. We first make him solely a teacher, and then conceal the very substantial agreement between his teachings and those of all other great moral teachers. For humans must not be allowed to notice that all great moralists are sent by the enemy not to inform men, but to remind them, to restate the primal moral platitudes against our continual concealment of them. We make the sophist. He raises up a Socrates to answer them. Our third aim is, by these constructions, to destroy the devotional life. For the real presence of the enemy, otherwise experienced by men in prayer and sacrament, we substitute a merely probable, remote, shadowy, and uncouth figure, one who spoke a strange language and died a long time ago. Such an object cannot, in fact, be worshipped. Instead of the Creator adored by its creature, you soon have merely a leader acclaimed by a partisan, and finally a distinguished character approved by a judicious historian. And fourthly, besides being unhistorical in the Jesus it depicts, religion of this kind is false to history in another sense. No nation and few individuals are really brought into the enemy's camp by the historical study of the biography of Jesus, simply as a biography. Indeed, materials for a full biography have been withheld from men. The earliest converts were converted by a single historical fact, the resurrection, and a single theological doctrine, the redemption, operating on a sense of sin which they already had. And sin not against some new fancy dress law produced as a novelty by a great man, but against the old platitudinous universal moral law, which they had been taught by their nurses and mothers. The Gospels come later and were written not to make Christians, but to edify Christians already made. So this is a very confusing paragraph, but essentially what's going on here is that in the early 1900s, there was a movement to split the idea of Christ, to respect him, yes, as a great man historically, but to doubt in his divine powers. And this wasn't just in the early 1900s, but went back before that as well. For example, Thomas Jefferson produced a version of the Bible based on this principle. So that's kind of an interesting historical fact. So this is kind of, we don't really hear this idea much nowadays of like splitting Jesus into two different people and doubting his divine powers. But back in this time that C.S. Lewis was writing and before that, this was a thought that was circulating. The historical Jesus then, however dangerous he may seem to be to us at some particular point, is always to be encouraged. About the general connection between Christianity and politics, our position is more delicate. Certainly we do not want men to allow their Christianity to flow over into their political life, for the establishment of anything like a really just society would be a major disaster. On the other hand, we do want, and want very much, to make men treat Christianity as a means, preferably, of course, as a means to their own advancement, but failing that, as a means to anything, even to social justice. The thing to do is to get a man at first to value social justice as a thing which the enemy demands, and then work him on to the stage at which he values Christianity because it may produce social justice. For the enemy will not be used as a convenience. So basically, the devils don't want a society based on Christian teachings, right? They don't want that. They don't want like the Bible to be like the bedrock of society. However, they're not opposed to the idea of a Christian politician, because if you are a Christian politician, okay, great, you could end up like leading a morally sound life, right? And basing all of your decisions on biblical principles. However, if you do become corrupt, then what is that showing society as a quote unquote Christian? And so the devils are okay with the idea of a Christian politician because they feel like politicians can be easily swayed and corrupted and therefore present a false view of how a Christian should be acting. Men or nations who think they can revive the faith in order to make a good society might just as well think they can use the stairs of heaven as a shortcut to the nearest pharmacy. Fortunately, it is quite easy to coax humans round this little corner. Only today I found a passage in a Christian writer where he recommends his own version of Christianity on the ground that only such a faith can outlast the death of old cultures and the birth of new civilizations. You see the little rift? Believe this, not because it is true, but for some other reason. That's the game. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. So this letter to me, it does deal with the idea of Christianity, but it jumps around a lot. It goes from us realizing that the girl that the patient is dating comes from like a very strong Christian background and she is a believer, to then jumping to the ideas through history of like who Jesus is and having people focus on the historical figure and doubt his divine powers, then jumps again to the idea of Christianity and politics. So this letter kind of goes all over the place, in my opinion.